Welcome to the AgEmerge podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monte Bottens. Thanks for joining us.
Before we jump into the podcast, we'd like to let you know about our AgEmerge Summer Summit. Mark your calendar for August 4th and 5th. Come see Monte in person and experience soil health and regenerative agriculture in action on the Bottens family farm in Cambridge, Illinois. From the basics to the wild side, get your questions answered and engage in thought-provoking discussion as we share years of experience in a full transparency farm tour. Oh, and we can't be all work and no play. So to wrap up the event, we'll spend a fun evening together in the pasture to enjoy dinner and live music at the 4th annual Concert with the Cows, hosted by Grateful Grays. So to get more information and register for the event, head on over to our website at asn.farm. And now, on to our show. Thanks for joining us. Today we welcome Paul Greive, Pasturebird's co-founder and VP of Sales and Marketing, located in Temecula, California. Paul shares with us Pasturebird's awesome story and what has driven their team to reinvent American poultry production. They've worked to scale the production of regenerative poultry, raising over 2 million chickens without antibiotics or drugs. They've kept their focus on the land, the animal, and the consumer, all while improving soil every year. Paul says, we use nature as our template and move animals to fresh pasture every day. Listen in as Monte and Paul discuss this great American story of passion, innovation, and regeneration.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the AgEmerge podcast. I am honored to have Paul Greive with us today. He is a 10th generation poultry farmer from the heart of poultry country in Arkansas. Is that right? Did I get that right, Paul?
Yeah, you're close.
Just, wait, you're first generation in the desert of California, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're in the wrong spot.
Well, there actually was a lot of poultry here, maybe 50 to 75 years ago. And like most of the ag, it's largely just been developed and land's got real expensive. And so you don't see much farming, at least animal farming happening out this way anymore.
So I guess
the politics may have had something to do with it too. I don't know.
That could be. So let me do a better introduction. Paul is actually a first generation farmer, which that's really important. And I think people need to pay attention because it's great to see innovative minds coming into agriculture using regenerative ag techniques and ag technology to make it happen and address a market that's really growing. And the other thing is he started in Temecula, California, which Temecula today is known mainly for wine and houses. So it's neat to see animal production back in Temecula. So tell us your story. How'd you get started? What are you crazy? You had a great job and then you started chasing chickens. Tell us how this all happened, Paul.
Yeah, it's not the normal way to get into farming, I guess, but we always say it goes back to a tick bite. I went in the Marine Corps right after college and I was in sniper school in Virginia and all of us were laying in the woods for, 3-4 days and you do tick checks afterwards and everybody's got a bunch of ticks all over them and we're in the backwoods of Virginia. And so one of the ones that I had, one of the 77 happened to give me Lyme disease. And from that, you get the big bullseye rash. And then shortly after I started getting a lot of weird inflammation and brain fog and just excess fatigue and stuff. And this is about 2007, 2008, started eating differently and feeling really differently. And that was the first time I ever thought about food, really. Because before that, I grew up in downtown Seattle, city kid, never thought about where my food came from, grew up on McDonald's and we didn't really think much of it, just food was what it was. When I came back from Iraq, my family was all pretty interested in it. And they were actually just joking around about getting some chickens for the backyard. My in-laws had a place out in Temecula. They had a couple acre backyard. And we sort of liked what Joel Salatin was doing in Virginia. And we thought that was some pretty cool stuff. And we were really all just joking about it. My brother-in-law apparently wasn't. because he kind of disappeared from the room, came back about 10 minutes later, and he said, "Oh, hey guys, I just ordered those 50 chicks we were talking about, and they're going to be here in 2 weeks." And none of us had ever raised chickens or anything more than maybe a family dog before that. So it was right into the fire with it.
That's a great way to start. If you're going to do it, just do it.
Yeah. I mean, going back and looking at it, it would have been great to like read that book behind you or some other books, but really our first step was to order animals. And then, then we read Pasture Poultry Profits next. And that really became our Bible for like the next 3 years. 50 birds, was meant for the family, but I put some things up on social media back then. And friends and family started to get real interested and excited, and they started to put down deposits. And pretty soon we had collected deposits on all 50 of these little birds that weren't even ready for harvest yet. And I remember that May, June 2012, being out in the backyard with, an iPad with a YouTube video showing how to process chickens. And right next to it was our first chicken. And it was like, all right, I guess we're just going to figure this out, and our first 10,000 or so birds, we harvested right there in the backyard. And I always say I used to have a lot more friends because we'd invite friends over to come help us. And before you know it, they're going, yeah, I'm kind of busy that day. It's just not the most glamorous job on the farm, harvesting poultry and sweltering desert heat. So, we lost a lot of friends during that time.
It's like asking your friends to help you move, but only worse.
Yeah, exactly. And now they all want to come over for the barbecues now that we have the meat. But back then, I remember who was coming and who wasn't. So 50 birds sold out really fast, 2012. Kind of fast forward the next flock, we decided to order 100 because 50 did so well. And kind of the same thing happened. And then did 200. And then, kind of kept just every kind of dollar of profit would go reinvest right back into ordering the next bigger batch of chicks and building another coop. And kind of 50 became 100, became 200, became 500, became 5,000 eventually. And my wife and I found ourselves kind of at a crossroad. I had a great 6-figure job in Newport Beach, and that was a great lifestyle, but this farm thing was calling us. And she grew up in Temecula. I'm sure you're familiar with towns where when you grow up in a town like Temecula, kind of the goal is to never come back to Temecula. And so she said 2 things: I'll never marry military and I'll never move back to Temecula. And, before she knew it, both of those were kind of shot. So we were moving back in. We moved in with her folks. Actually, there was 9 of us at one point that all decided to move back into the little 1,700 square foot house and just reinvest every dollar that we could into the business and try to get it to grow. And we caught a really big break in about 2014. We were contacted by the LA Lakers, and the team chef at that time was looking for the highest quality, most nutrient dense animal protein that they could possibly find for their players. This is when Kobe Bryant and Steve Nash were getting towards the end of their career. And they didn't care what the cost was. They were going to spend whatever it took to get the best stuff they could. And they came out, they toured the farm, and they became huge supporters of us. And yeah, it's only, 12 or 15 guys and some staff members, but they're also 7 foot tall, and they eat like, an enormous amount of food. So that became a huge thing for us. And shortly after that, the Lakers, the Dodgers ended up calling and doing the same thing. So our first 2 sort of wholesale accounts were the Lakers and the Dodgers. And that opened our eyes to, there's probably something bigger than this little tiny direct to consumer, CSA really style operation, which was Primal Pastures. That's our original family business. And we said, okay, I bet that there's a bigger demand, a more conventional commodity kind of demand for pasture raised chicken done in this unique way. So that really was the birth of Pasturebird at that point, 2015.
That's quite a story. So, you glossed over a lot of things. And I'm, for the farmers out there considering doing this and getting to that kind of scale, it's one thing you definitely identified was some key partners there. Only, it wasn't that many people you were feeding, but the promotional opportunities and mentions out of that had to be phenomenal.
It really was. And it was a confidence booster for us too.
True.
A lot of this business thing has just been teetering on, lack of confidence and overconfidence and trying to get it right in the middle somewhere. And so it was just an awesome confirmation for us 2 years into the business that, the Lakers who live off of their nutrition. That's what they make their check off of, that they would kind of recognize that and see us. And there's we're all sports guys. So we got to go up and walk through the clubhouse and meet players and, see
cool.
the dugout and walk on the field. It was a pretty cool moment for us.
Well, it has to help too, doing what you do, because, farming is hard work. Being a Marine, you're used to embracing the suck, and you're used to being up for hours on, days on end. And, so that part didn't hurt in your startup days, that experience. No. And then the other thing too is, really, if you look at that, when you isolated those two things, you were a market sniper in that case. You were really targeting in. And I think too many people try to do too much for everyone, right? Versus being very focused on your niche. And, that whole nutrient density story then got you to thinking about, okay, who else does nutrient density apply to, and away you went. So kind of interesting, the background and how that fed into your farming career,
Well, and you talk about sniping. So that's interesting, because staying focused has been a hallmark of our success. I think there's been a million shiny objects. We actually wanted to be beef cattle farmers. That was the whole goal. And when we looked at where you do the SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats. We looked at the whole dynamic. We looked at our weather. We looked at land prices. We looked at how much rainfall we get. A big, huge part for us was USDA processing capacity. And so when we looked at all those things, said, as much as we want to be, regenerative beef cattle farmers here in Southern California, the desert, chicken just makes a whole lot more sense. And one other really important one, capital. We had no money. So
your turnover
I was
so
making
much quicker
good money, but I was spending a lot of money, to live in Newport Beach too. And so when we came into the business, 4 of us put in $500 each, and just to buy a 20 cow herd, and to have a cow calf or to finish, there was no way we could have done that. But with chicken, you're 7 weeks from hatch to finish, and I can kind of push out a credit card bill just far enough to kind of put the chick on and the feed on and get the bird processed in time to collect a deposit and actually keep that cycle essentially working. So for all those reasons, as much as we want to be beef cattle farmers, poultry is what jumped right out to us. And I think there's a lot of people doing a great job with grass-fed and grass-finished beef out there. Mm-hmm. And so why are we going to go try to compete in a market that's totally, saturated? You can go to any local health food store and find really good grass-fed, grass-finished beef, at least in our area, farmers market. But there's nobody doing pasture-raised chicken around here. And so that was a good place for us to enter the market. It's also sunny 340 days a year here. So it's a great place to do year-round chicken. And so for all those reasons, we kind of sniped the opportunity of poultry, and we tried to not get too distracted. Even when our customers started asking for beef, for a while we refer to our kind of neighboring farms and stuff like that. But then we met some old school ranchers that just didn't want to talk to people. And so we said, okay, well, what if instead of raising our own beef cattle, what if we went full transparency, started buying cattle from these guys finished and selling them to our customers under our label? And I think that was ended up being a really good decision. Instead of trying to be beef, chicken, lamb, pork, wild fish, try to do everything ourselves, we became really good at chicken. And then we aggregated some of those other proteins for the convenience factor for our customers. And that and many other things, I think focus has been really key to our success.
No, that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about how you've been able to take it and go from, 500, 200, 5,000, 50,000. You've been a long path on moving from small to large. So I imagine you mentioned pasture poultry profits. You probably started with the original Salatin chicken tractor, chicken saw or whatever, and moving it by hand across pasture. Then I know just because when we were setting it up, I was looking at your social media posts and such, and we set up the mobile range coupes. The roughly 20 by 40.
You have those
greenhouses on skids. Yep.
Nice.
And but now, if you're on the YouTube version of the podcast right here, if you're looking in the background, tell us about what is the latest and greatest you and your team have developed right behind you on the screen.
Yeah, so we developed, it's the really common path to go from the Salatin Coupe to the mobile range Coupe. And it's so funny because every time you jump into a new thing, you think, all right, this is what do forever. This is going to be the forever. So we went from a wooden Salatin Coupe that we pulled by hand to an actual metal framed, a metal framed Salatin Coupe. And we put a push bar on it so we could come up with a Kubota and just push it forward. And I mean, that decreased chore time by 75%, being able to just push them instead of pull them. And then, we thought that would be thousands of birds and all this stuff. But then shortly later, we learned about the mobile range coop, and that's just a floorless greenhouse, essentially. Pulled manually, fed manually, watered more or less manually too. And the real genesis of what's behind me, which is the automated range coop now, is just this desire. Starting in 2015 or 2016, none of us in my family, came up with a lot of money. And after a bit of doing this business and selling birds for what we have to sell them for at our small scale, $30, $35 for a whole chicken. I mean, it's great for people that can afford it, but the way we came up, my folks and, my in-laws, they could have never afforded to buy that kind of a product. And we kind of just got to this point in the business where we said, it's cool. I mean, I love selling these expensive kind of farmers market niche products, but I also would love to produce something that was more accessible to more people. And I really believe in regenerative, and I really believe in the nutrient density piece of this. And so what would it take to kind of like make this product 10, 20% premium over like a Trader Joe's or a Sprouts, or kind of one of these products that more people could have access to? And it came back to scale, and a lot of it came back to the labor involved. So when you're out there, and this because you've got mobile range coops, when you're out there pulling each coop by tractor every single day, we still have 70 or so of those mobile range coops. We haven't replaced them all yet. We would like to, but we haven't yet. And I estimate that we have close to $1 per bird in labor alone. And you talk about the industry. I would say the industry, that's all the big guys, essentially everybody else. They're well under 10 cents. And so we're 10X just on labor alone. And then you factor in buying chicks off the shelf, buying feed off the shelf, buying, all the processing is off the shelf. And quickly it adds up, and we got to add your own margin to it. It adds up to this really expensive product. So we said, all right, well, what would it take to A, reduce the labor, and then B, get vertically integrated so that we have our own hatchery, feed mill, processing, logistics, transportation. And so I think that we've solved, or that we're on the cusp of solving both of those. So the labor situation, we had to make the coops bigger to allow for more modern infrastructure to go into them. So in a mobile range coop, that's like a 500 or 600 bird system. It's really hard to invest in augers, feed pans, solar power, any ventilation control, all the things that the modern industry is doing de facto. Even in their oldest houses, they have climate control through a whole house controller. They have an auger that pulls feed out of a silo and puts it into pans for you. The drinkers are all, really dialed. They're not leaking all over the place, and they do a really good job with water distribution. So we wanted to take like the best from the industry, but then combine it with what we think is really special about pastured poultry, which is moving birds to fresh grass every day. So in about 2017, our kind of favorite group, APA, the American Pasture Poultry Producers Association, was on a roadshow with Jeff Maddox, who's kind of a pioneer there, and Dan Cody. Dan was, he had originally worked for White Oak Pastures. Then he worked for Cobb Creek Farms out of Texas. He's also worked on Joel Salatin's place. And he shared this vision for scaling pastured poultry to 1 million chickens a week. And that was actually, it was funny because that's always been my exact number. It's like, man, we could figure out how to scale this to 1 million birds a week. I think that we can get the cost so close to conventional that nobody's going to have any reason not to buy pastured poultry. And I sort of wanted to do it, and I was dreaming about it. He had a plan on how to do it. And so the big innovation was, instead of pulling, it sounds simple, right? But instead of pulling the coops long ways, we're going to pull them short ways. And broiler chickens, they just don't want to walk 150 or 200 feet on a hot summer day. They're just not really going to do it. So we flipped the coop around, we jacked it up and put it on casters, and we motorized the casters off of a solar panel. And so the way that the system works now, what you're looking at behind me is it's up on wheels, and it drives itself every day. So it's not like a guy has to come out and pull it with a tractor. I mean, it's a push of a button, or really it can be even automated to a timer, where it's going to kick on first thing in the morning in the heat of the summer, when the ground's still cool, or it's going to kick on right in the warmest part of the day in the middle of winter when the ground's really cold, and we want it to warm up a bit, and it's going to move really, really slow. So what you're seeing behind me, it would take 5 to 7 minutes just to move to a whole new spot of pasture. And you understand all the benefits of that because you're a pasture poultry farmer, but some people don't, you know.
Well, that
in 90,
you're talking,
go ahead.
The width on that, Paul, is what, 60 foot wide or 100 foot wide? 50 foot.
Feet
so
wide.
You're taking 5 to 7 minutes to move 50 feet. So the birds have plenty of opportunity in that. But I think for those who aren't doing pasture poultry, that fresh grass is a key. And the other thing to keep in mind too is those birds get bigger. They eat that floor down quicker. So, I mean, it gives you that control to where when they're small, they may not need a full width move, or when they're big, they may need to be moved twice, just depending on what your goals are and such. And like you said too, because it's automated now, you could put sensors in there, because sometimes you have grass that's 6 inches tall, sometimes it's foot tall, you know, grass just varies, but you could have the thing automatically move forward at whatever speed that you want based on, looks like it's 8 down, move it forward. But it can only move forward if the ground temperature is this or the air temperature is this. And you could build all those parameters. Once you get it moving on its own, oh man.
The world becomes your oyster. And we haven't done a lot of that, but I'm right there with you. That's what it opens up, is that automation. And you can build an algorithm based on manure distribution. So you get perfectly even manure distribution, or you could do something based on soil moisture or temperature. I mean, there's a million ways to do it.
And you know how much they eat. And all you got to do is how many pounds they eat, have weigh scales on your silos on the end. They ate that much, move it. Because, you know, if they eat 100 pounds, they make this much manure. That's just, you know, it's a straight line correlation. So,
yeah, it's really, really cool. And then I was going to kind of explain for people that don't understand the difference of pasture raised or say free range, you know, a lot of people think they're the same thing, but really the way that the industry at large does this is it's stationary housing. So whether it's organic or free range or just no antibiotics, really any label that you'll see in the store is based off of a stationary housing model with varying degrees of outdoor access. But what that does is the birds are essentially eating, sleeping, drinking, and pooping all in the same place, you know, every single day. It would be like, you know, I use this as crude, but if you kind of lived in your bathroom and just never flushed your toilet, you know, it smells from a long ways away. It comes at an environmental cost, and it comes at a bird kind of health cost too. You have immune system function that's degraded from animals living with a lot of ammonia. And sure, you know, people think, oh, well, they have unlimited access to 800 acres of pasture. Well, you look, they're chickens, first of all, so they're prey animals. They want to be close to their buddies.
People are called chicken.
The food and water. Yeah, exactly. So they may pop their head out a bit, but they're not going out there for most of their life. They're spending most of their life inside the barn. And that's where they feel safe and comfortable and secure. And so instead of trying to make a chicken do something it really doesn't want to do, the whole pasture poultry concept is that we're going to actually move their house every single day so that the manure transfers from being a big liability to actually being an asset and really restoring these grasslands that you put them on. So we've seen unbelievable outcomes. We got on a 50-year conventional potato field when we first got onto our farm, and it was degraded. I mean, it was really, the nutrients were just mined out of it, and we could barely get weeds to grow that first year, even with all the water we wanted to put down, and we got a few kind of leafy, nasty looking weeds. And now, I mean, we're growing stands of grass that are 3 feet tall right here in the desert, and organic matter's tripled, biodiversity is kind of up 5x, you know, and organic matter increases water retention, which is huge in a desert environment because we get all of our rain in about 3 months. And so when we get a big 3 or 4 inch storm here and you don't have the soil that's able to hold on to it, it's all running off. And you end up catching, you know, if we get 11 inches of rain in a year and you have tilled soil, you may only catch 2 or 3 inches of that. So everything's going to have to get pulled back out of the water table. But when we get this healthy permanent pasture, we're catching like 32 million additional gallons on our 160 acre farm that wouldn't have been caught before. And what that does is it gives us all 11 of those inches. Yeah, it's not a lot, and it's all coming in one season, but we're catching all of it now instead of having it run off. So it's just it's been a lot of fun to get this system up and running. I think there's so much more that can be added to it. So I'm really excited even for the next 5 years of what it looks like. And now, I don't know if you're familiar, but we have the backing of Purdue as well. And so that is really where we solve this vertical integration piece, which is the other half of the coin, right, to help bring costs down and to really keep it capitalized. And honestly, to bring in the best and brightest from conventional agriculture, because I think for too long, the pasture raised space or sort of the regenerative space has thought, oh, I think big ag is terrible and stupid and bad
thing,
and vice versa.
Right.
And there's really a lot that we can learn from each other. And so it's been really one of the highlights of my career, 10-year career in ag, is being able to sit down with these guys, have honest, real conversations about where we have shortcomings, and how they can kind of jump in and help. We're not chicken guys. They go in and they start talking about all the different, growth rates and feed conversions and, livability and all these things. We don't know any of that stuff. We kind of figured out how to move a lot of chickens to fresh pasture each day. We're not like, PhD chicken guys by any means. So it's been a lot of fun to learn from them in those respects. And I think teach them a few things too,
We're taking a short break to share that the AgEmerge podcast is brought to you by the team at Ag Solutions Network. Rooted in innovation, ASN is committed to leaving the land better than we found it, not simply maintaining it. We're here to help you navigate the balancing act of productivity and building a legacy. From practices to products, ASN is more than a new jug. It's a new way of thinking. So don't be afraid to be different. Be afraid to be the same. Contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm. And now, back to our show.
So I did want to jump into that partnership with Purdue a little bit. But so you mentioned earlier, currently today, are you then utilizing Purdue on the hatchery side, or do you do your own hatching? Okay, so
we actually received an investment from them in about 2018. And by the middle of 2019, we realized we wanted to, that was our dating, and by 2019, we wanted to get married. There was just too many things that were making sense for our mission as Pasturebird, which was to really make nutrient dense and regenerative food more accessible and affordable. And so we wanted to partner. And so they acquired our company, kind of full stop. My entire team became Purdue employees. I'm a Purdue employee right now. Mm-hmm. And we've all stayed on, for the last 2.5 years to help grow this. And we're just as excited about it now as we were, 5 years ago, because I think it gives us the ability to really hit on those goals. So we have their hatcheries. We operate out of their feed mills. We operate out of their processing plants.
So Purdue does have those feed mills and processing plants in California.
They do. Yeah.
Okay. Because the California markets, for those that don't know, is dominated a lot by Foster Farms, I believe. And then I didn't know I know Purdue's I thought they were more back east, but they're in that market then too.
They're heavily concentrated in the East Coast, really the Delmarva Peninsula, which is at Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. Kind of that's their stomping grounds. It's where the business was born 100 years ago. 1920 is when they were formed. Out here, it is dominant. We thought, to be honest, we would have partnered with Foster or with Mary's, is another big chicken company out this way in California. They're in our backyard. We got a lot of respect for what they do. Right. I mean, we kind of just would have thought that that's who we would have worked with. But what happened was Ryan Purdue, who's the fourth generation Purdue, he's Frank Purdue's grandson, who's the guy that was always on the commercials, back in the 80s and stuff. He actually lives in California, and he has a huge interest in regenerative and in pasture raised. And, he's got his family's chicken business, but he's also understands the California market, the premium market, and he understands regenerative. And so he came out for a farm tour in early 2018. And I think we just kind of hit it off, where he saw the world very much the same way we did, where it's amazing. I mean, all these kind of niche farmers market producers, that's great, but nobody's filling the gap for that mid-tier pasture raised national alternative. And so why do you have, free range and then it drops all the way to farmer's market? There's nothing in between anywhere. And I think Purdue is a company, say what you want about them, but they're a company that doesn't want to fake stuff. And so if they're going to do something, they want to do it for real. And they saw the writing on the wall with a lot of people doing fake pasture raised and outdoor access and all this stuff. They have a huge free range business. And I give them a lot of credit because they could go today and slap a pasture raised label on all of those free range chickens and the USDA couldn't say a word about it, but they decided to take the high road and work with somebody who is authentically doing pasture raised. And it's been a really unique and I think special, and I always use the word cautiously optimistic because, we still have a lot of work to do with them. But I would say if anything, our standards have only really increased since working with them. And I've been able to have the capital, without having to go out and talk to investors and go raise money and sell our soul and all this stuff. We've been able to have the capital to really develop this into multiple states now and have the processing too, because back in the day, we were doing an off-the-shelf processor. And if at any point in time, that guy could have called us up and said, you know what, I don't like you anymore and I don't want to process your birds. And we would have been out of business, This gives us a lot more resiliency to have our own plant at our disposal.
Plus, at your million bird a week goal, I mean, what mid-sized plant or independent plant has that capacity? It just doesn't exist. So then that would require you to build that plant, right? So it's bad enough being your own hatchery,
right?
And raising them, but then getting into having your own processing, that's a whole.
Well, and you go back to this sniper conversation, and it's like, I don't want to innovate on things that people are already doing a good job on, right? So we look at hatchery. I'm sure there's areas you could do better with hatchery. I don't know, though. I think Purdue's excellent at hatching a quality, consistent chicken. I look at processing. Could they, are there areas for improvement everywhere? Yeah, obviously. But is my passion to go and try to innovate within processing and do something really special? Not really,
And you're making the changes that are possible to make there are such small incremental
changes.
No, just
exactly.
Small. But what you're doing on how you're raising them, that's a monstrous change in nutrient density, ecosystem services, health, all these things. It's a huge change. And I appreciate the fact that you saw that and focused on that.
I'll say one thing that you'll appreciate too is even really only half or so of their life is what I'm innovating on. So for years, we struggled with brooding. Brooding is actually the hardest part of raising a pastured broiler. It's where you make or break your money. It's where everything either goes, if it goes good in the brooder, the rest of the flock's going to be great. If it goes bad in the brooder, you're going to have a terrible time recovering from it. So even that, we took a step back. We looked at everything and said, well, if we could have unlimited capital to build the perfect brooder for chickens, what would it look like? And we looked at shipping containers and greenhouses and mobile and all these different things. And what we actually ended up settling on, you probably know, you'd be able to guess.
I haven't checked this part out. Go ahead. Tell me.
A conventional chicken house is the perfect brooder. A stationary, conventional poultry house.
Because you have
ventilation, they have heat,
everything.
They have everything dialed in for those first 2 to 2.5 weeks of life for that bird. And they're the foremost leading experts in the world at taking care of little baby chicks. And so we saw this opportunity to partner with Purdue as well, because instead of reinventing the wheel on brooding, why don't we let them do what they're good at and put a few extra birds into a few different houses? We'll pull them out when they're 2.5 weeks old, and then we'll use those for our pasture. So and that's really what we're doing with them now. And it's working amazing from that perspective too.
That's a beautiful idea, because on their conventional birds, they're doing in-house brooding typically, right?
Exactly.
So they're doing in-house brooding. They'll put like a tile or something across just to kind of section it off where they only get a portion of the barn. So you heat control that portion of the barn. And you're like, well, they're using a quarter of the barn at that time. Can I just have the other end? Is what you're doing.
That's all we're doing. Yeah. So it's called
hardly
no extra half-house brooding, Yeah. And it's really just a waste of square footage for the first 3 weeks of their life. Mm-hmm. We can help actually make that side a little bit more, not a ton, but a little bit more profitable. Mm-hmm. And then the birds are gone by the time it's time for pasture. So that's been a really cool kind of side note that really only chicken farmers understand, but it's a big deal.
But there's something you would have had to come up with, and that's that you're exploring uncharted territory, is that whole process of how do I get them now from the stationary barn to the mobile range coop or the automated range coop. Yep. So talk to us about the innovations you've done there.
Yeah, the reason why we did the 150 foot by 50 foot autonomous coop is because that is our same ratio that we used in the Salatin coop, and the same ratio we used in the mobile range coop is at 1.25 square foot per bird per day. That feels like the perfect amount of manure distribution to give you a good impact on the land without being too much or too little. And so we knew that we wanted to be 6,000 birds. 6,000 5-pound birds is what fits on a semi truck that'll bring you up to the slaughterhouse. And so we optimized the entire system off of filling up a full truck to go into the slaughterhouse. And then we built the square footage based on that. So it would have been done to go an extra 20 or 30 feet or an extra, 500 square feet, because it wouldn't fit on that truck anyways. So now we can fill up one truck per ARC. And so the way it works is the birds are in the brooder 2.5 weeks. We pick them. Well, it depends on the time of year. They may be 2.5 weeks. They may be 3 weeks. It just depends on how cold it is wherever we're going.
Cold or rainy, you keep them longer.
Yeah, exactly. Our standard is they have to be on pasture for the majority of their life, which means 51% or more. So we have a few, days in there of leeway, but we do want to get them out to pasture as early as possible. Mm-hmm. At that 2.5, 3 weeks mark, we have catch crew go in, pick them all up, load them into transportation crates. Late at night, they bring them down, they bring them out to the farm. First thing in the morning, kind of drop them onto the ground, open them up, and then they're in the pasture coops for the rest of their life. That's usually 45 to 49 day total. So if 18 of that is used up by, brooding, then it's like 27 days out in the field. And every day, like you said, we're moving them every single day to a fresh spot. When they're a little tiny, when they're only like 19 days old, maybe they need a half move every day. By the time they're 45 days old, maybe they need 2 moves per day. Usually they really don't. 45 is sort of the limit. If we went to 55 days, I would want to move them twice a day. But we like that, 1.25 square foot impact with like a 5-pound live weight chicken. Mm-hmm. I don't like raising broilers in these mobile systems much more than 5 pounds live weight. I think you could go to 5.5, but going up to like a 6.5 or 7.5 pound bird, they don't move real well. And I don't know, I think it starts to get kind of weird with that.
And plus, I think the consumer wants chicken, not turkey.
Yeah, exactly. You start to get some of those birds that look like little mini turkeys, right?
So that's pretty interesting. Thinking through the whole process. What am I best at? And focusing on what you're best at, and what is somebody else best at? Let them do that. And I think that's a business principle, no matter what industry you're in. And I think everybody listening to this, whether you're an ag tech entrepreneur or farmer, you need to think about what are you best at, do that, and let someone else do what they do. And I like how you matched everything. No different than a corn farmer taking a 24-row planter with a 12-row corn head, and you've got a grain cart that matches. We are doing that already. You just thought through that. Is that, okay, my unit out is a truck, 6,000 birds, and back figured it. Smart. And I love how you're using the other barns for their brooding. I mean, and plus that farmer is gaining revenue that he wouldn't have before. And the extra energy he's taking to heat a little bit more of that barn is not twice as much. It's maybe 10% as much. So, everybody wins. It's just a much better use of assets. So,
yeah. And actually the more birds you have in there, the warmer it is.
Yeah. The more heat they generate themselves.
Yeah. Brooding. I mean, I don't know how you're dealing with brooding, but it was a constant struggle for us. Brooding a good quality, consistent bird. And no matter if we're doing 50 birds or 5,000, brooding was just always a challenge. And so to be able to lean on Purdue with that side of it and let us really stay focused on the grow out piece, which is that 3 to 7 weeks, it just allows us to get really good at it. It's not that we couldn't do it. I'm sure we could have built our own brooders and do all that, but we wouldn't have gotten as good at the pasture side of it because we would have been dealing with everything else,
So 150 acre farm there or so that you started on in Temecula, 1 million birds per week. I can do the math here in my head. That won't quite support 1 million birds a week. So I'm sure you've got an innovative approach. I know a little bit about it, but talk to us about how you're going to make that happen by partnering with other farms and other locations with ARC and those kind of things to make that dream keep coming to reality.
Yeah, this is like the thing I'm maybe the most excited about for this whole space is that the whole model of scaling up pasture-raised livestock, especially poultry, is that we can now start to integrate with crop farms. So most of what we're looking at from here on out, we're on 3 different ranches in Georgia right now. Georgia will be a huge area of growth for us. Mm-hmm. It's just a better place to farm chickens, kind of carte blanche than California. There's a reason why it's the chicken belt, they get rain. We don't. Land is a lot cheaper. The farmers really know poultry there. We have a big Purdue plant out there that we can leverage. We have a small Purdue plant out here in California that we can leverage. I'm not saying I'm super passionate about farming in California. We are going to keep farming in California, but I think a lot of the growth, especially in this accessible and affordable space, is going to come out of Georgia. And so we're currently on 3 different farms. One is a hayfield where the guy has about 500 acres, keeps about 300 of it in hay production. He used to throw synthetic fertilizer on that every single year to grow his hay crop. So we didn't teach him about pasture poultry. He was already wanting to do pasture poultry. He's a 3rd generation Purdue conventional chicken farmer. And when he heard that Purdue was interested, he said, sign me up. I want to be the first one to do it. That's Kenny Young. We see him on some of our videos. Awesome guy, really amazing regenerative cattle story. And then he's using the poultry for added revenue on his farm, which is a lot of guys do that. Mm-hmm. And he'll spread some of the chicken litter when he can and stuff. But since adding these ARCs, so he runs, I think 4 ARCs right now. In the last 18 months, he has not had to apply synthetic fertilizer once because he's using the chickens for that same purpose. And not only that, he's not having to spend the money on the synthetic fertilizer, and he's getting revenue from running the pasture poultry. So it's been this really cool deal. And that's some of the videos that you'll see on my social media is his farm. Mm-hmm. And the green stripe, I always like to talk about that green stripe that you see behind the ARC. When you see kind of like the light green, and then there's this dark, rich green from the area that the chickens came through. I mean, that's nutrient density. That's building up organic matter. That's growing a better hay crop for him. And so he's getting more hay. He's getting a better hay crop with less input and more revenue. And so when you can get these capitalistic and regenerative combinations, where it's not like, I don't need the government to go tell him to do that. He's making more money and he's getting a better output. So that's where I think you can really start to see large scale change without having to rely on the government to go write policy or carbon credits or all these kind of, not that there's anything wrong with those. They just move really slow, and I don't trust either of them. I don't trust either of those too much. So
they move slower than your automatic range Coupe. So
exactly.
But no, I agree with you. When you can make the practice economically viable or more viable, problem solved, right?
Exactly.
So, everything lines up, and when the stars align, some magical things happen. So
that's a hayfield, and then now in Georgia. We're on a rotational peanut, cotton, and wheat crop field. We kind of just bought a new farm out there, 200 plus acres.
You're a peanut, cotton, wheat, chicken rotation.
Chicken.
So you got to think of the chicken as the rotation.
That's what I'm really excited about. It's this concept that we jump on, for example, 1,000-acre rotation that's in corn and beans, or it's in cotton and it's whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. It's flat, good farm ground. Yeah. And instead of running fallow every 3 or 5 years, throw chickens on it in a cover crop, put the birds on there for 2 to 3 years, and then you rotate the poultry in just like it's another crop. And that gives you a massive amount of nutrient, impact, because cows are great, right? They're grazing the grass and they're pooping back on the ground, but they have more of an impact because they're heavy and they have hooves, but they have less of an impact because you're not bringing in any feed for them. So with chickens and pigs, you're bringing in all this tonnage of outside feed. And so all that's getting recycled through the bird into organic fertilizer for the farm. And really, it's not an either or, because everywhere we run chickens, we run cattle as well. As that grass starts to get healthy, chickens don't like really tall grass. You talked about the kind of 8-inch mark. We like to keep our grass for the birds like 4 inches or lower. It helps a lot with the foot pad dermatitis and some of those things as well. So we'll use the cattle as a lawnmower, and we'll run the chickens, and then we'll run that, ultimately in rotation with crops. And I think that, you talk about 1 million birds a week, that's like 10 to 12,000 acres required. Sounds like a huge number. But if you look at cropland, I mean, it's a tiny fraction of one county in Georgia's cropland. I mean, it's nothing really in the grand scheme of things. And you look at what's happening with fertilizer prices right now, and, kind of like import and export. I think there's just so much opportunity for fertility through increased like profit. I mean, I'm really excited about this reintegration of animals and plants together. It's been pretty sad to watch them separate over the last, 70 years within agriculture. And so we grow all of our feedlot crops in the Midwest, and then we ship all that out to California. And you're a regenerative guy, so you know how I think. Well, why don't we just grow the cattle in the Midwest and raise them on the same grass? And it feels like a conventional. It feels like a regenerative solution to a conventional problem that could happen really fast, as opposed to, again, having to wait for policy or government intervention or any of those things.
One of the things we'll probably have to work on is the infrastructure, because the infrastructure of most of the processing plants has occurred in like you said, the chicken belt, if you will. And that's because of labor costs, labor availability, and quality of the soil. But all of a sudden, if we look at this in rotation along with the source of their corn crop coming out of the corn belt, there really needs to be a little more chicken processing capacity in the corn belt in order to support this, because farmers in that area would certainly be interested in having, this as part of their rotation, because those are high input crops that they're dealing with, and being able to put chicken in rotation would be a tremendous soil advantage.
Well, I get the question all the time. It's like, well, this model isn't good because you couldn't do it in the Midwest. And it's like, okay, there's several problems with that mindset. I know that. We're
going to do it at your 1 million birds a week. You're going
to need the Midwest.
We're going to have to. You can only be so far away from a plant, right?
I just say
8 hours of a plant.
No, you really want to be 2 hours to the plant max, and you want your hatchery and your feed mill all within that 2 hour radius.
Sure.
I didn't say you. I wasn't saying you were saying that, but I do hear that a lot.
No
People say, "Oh yeah, this is not a good model because how would I do it, in Minnesota?" And I say, "Well, look, there's two things to that. First of all, you can't grow corn in the winter in Minnesota either. That doesn't mean corn is a bad crop or something. And second of all, I could give you a list of a dozen farmers in Minnesota that are doing pasture poultry right now. You know how they do it? They do it seasonally. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of innovation happening right now with high quality freezing and thawing and selling. And so I think if you could figure this out in those, months that make sense, which is usually kind of like a March or April, last harvest in that kind of like September, October, November timeframe, I think you're going to see the entire Midwest open up on this model too. And it doesn't have to be year round. It helps, it definitely helps. That's why we're targeting the Sun Belt to launch with. It helps amortize. I can put more flocks through per year. I can keep labor employed all year round.
Yeah.
But it certainly doesn't have to be year-round model to work. So
you make a great point. I totally forgot about that. In a bigger scale model, is that having it in the South, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, those areas where you get lots of rain, ability to grow grass 12 months out of the year, that's a huge advantage. Plus, in our scenario, and you've run into it before with row crop farmers, if you get in an area that don't have a perennial grass established, as much as you like, right now when we got 3 inches of rain out here with nothing growing, we've got what we call a mud mess.
Right.
It's right. Look at those conditions. So talk to us.
Well, people are doing it. I mean, you've got dirt to soil right behind you, so full well this has been happening with crops and cattle for over a decade. Just and really, honestly, much longer than that. But the integration of animals and plants, I think turkey is a huge opportunity in the Midwest because it's much more of a seasonal crop,
True.
And so I think that there's it's going to be really fun. I always say we're in the golden age of regenerative right now. You're going to see so much happen in the next decade. And if you're kind of already thinking about it and practicing it, you've got a leg up, and everybody's going to be coming in behind us here. And it's going to be really fun to see what develops. And my goal is just that there would be authentic solutions put forward, not greenwashed, grabbing
another sticker
term and a label and sticking them on there, because that's what we're already seeing a decent amount of. So I'm really hoping, there's genuine innovation that happens over the next decade, because the market wants it. And nobody's really been talking about the nutrient density side of food yet. And when they start talking about that, regenerative will really shine,
That's the next thing I wanted to finish talking about was the market. Why do people want this? Who wants it? What does that look like? How much are they willing to pay? Give us some insights into this market, because, as farmers, we're like, oh, it's just, it's chicken with maybe a different description to it,
Right.
Talk to us about that customer and what they want, why they want that.
Well, it's funny you ask me this, because I have a really different view than I think like most people do. I think most people right now are thinking consumers care deeply about the environment, and they want to support programs that sequester carbon and that they take care of kind of the atmosphere. And I don't think that they're right about that. I think most people actually don't.
They're selfish. They do it for themselves.
It's not that they don't care about the environment. It's just they're not going to spend extra money to make my soil better, right? Unless it benefits them.
Why would they health, do that? Right? They're doing it for health is their motivation. And it's nice that it's for the environment. Great.
It's a nice add-on, but I don't think most people are not going to spend more money for that. Out here, I'm sitting in a Trader Joe's parking lot in California. Sure, there are markets where I think people will pay a bit extra for an environmental advantage, and it makes you feel like you're doing something good for the planet, or this idea of saving the planet, which we don't save the planet, it's the other way around. But no, what you said just now. So I think what most people really care about is trying to give their kids the best food that they can and the most nutrients that they can. And when you look at something like the Patagonia study of an orange from 50 years ago to now, 9 times more vitamin A 50 years ago than today in an orange. That's one tiny example. When we measured our pasture poultry against barn grown kind of outdoor access chicken, 3 times higher in omega-3s, way closer omega-3/6 ratio, 21% lower in saturated fat, 50% higher in vitamin A and E, 6 times higher in a lot of the micronutrients like glutathione and ATP, creatine, all these like supplements that you buy over the counter. I think when those messages start to get out, that sure, you're paying a little more dollars per pound for this kind of a product, but what you're getting in return is a far cheaper, if you looked at dollars per nutrient density, it's far cheaper than buying these conventional products. So I think when we can start to quantify that more and show people more of that, you're going to see more widespread adoption. And if the numbers are real, I just don't know too many moms that wouldn't spend a little bit extra to get their kids something that's better for them. I'm not going to say everybody will do it. Some people are on such a tight budget that they're just eating to survive. And for those people, I think the conventional model is actually brilliant, making food abundantly available and as cheap as possible for people that truly can't afford anything more than, the paycheck to paycheck. I get that. But I do think there's a big subset of people, more than 50% of people, that would spend a little bit more for a product that's actually much better for you. And that's kind of the market segment that we're going to go after. So I think you'll see our products in your mid-level retailers. I don't think it's limited to like a Whole Foods kind of situation. That's not even really my goal. My goal has always been the Trader Joe's, the kind of mid-level consumer that's willing to spend a little on better products, but they're not going to go break the bank. They're a regular blue collar, they're trying to keep a family afloat and do, afford rent or a mortgage. And they do want to eat a little better, but that for that family, it can't be $35 for a whole chicken. It just, as much as they want to feed their family healthy, they can't afford that. So, and they don't have time to go necessarily to a farmer's market on a Saturday and go do all this stuff. They need to be able to get it from the store that they're used to shopping at. So it's not just affordability, when we say accessibility, it also means we got to get these products in where real people actually shop too,
That's a whole nother discussion is, like you said, a lot of farmers are struggling with how to get to market, whether,
Right.
Farmers market, and that's a tremendous time investment and those kind of things. And then the online models help some, but the cost of delivery and every business that's gone through that cycle of deliver to the doors, that final mile is still a huge problem in any industry.
Yeah. I'll tell you who really made out the best on that one is FedEx. They're the ones that made all the money on that whole movement. And Primal Pastures is our family's original company. They still do the home delivery model. I think it's really special. We're really looking at that on bringing more of the deliveries in-house and keeping them more localized and serving our own community really well with a low cost in-house delivery as opposed to putting it on a FedEx truck.
Yep.
That works in some markets. For the guy out in rural Kansas with 1,500 people within a 2-hour radius, it's not going to work real well. So
correct.
So much of this depends on that SWOT analysis, and you got to look at what makes you unique and what makes you kind of special and how do you leverage that to the max.
Well, anything else we should have touched on today while we were together?
We're really excited about this. We're doing a lot with the live feed now. So transparency, I think, is key to combating greenwashing. And what we've started doing, try to do it about once a week, is we actually go live on our website. I bought an iPhone and kind of a tripod and set up this whole thing where we just go, you know what? Nobody else is willing to do it, but we're really willing to do it. So we just start a live stream in the morning and we run inside of the coops for everybody to see. We're not hiding anything. We're not doing anything different on those days. You just get to see the birds inside of their natural environment. And yeah, I'm really excited about that piece of it because transparency is really important to the next movement within food. And then, we've been working really hard on Pasturebird.com too. We do have our own version of like a home delivery kind of service and stuff like that. So if anybody wants to check that out and try our products, that's the best place to do it. And we ship to all 50 states, at least 48 states. And we've got some really cool packages and bundles and some different things. And then a lot of just really great content on there as well. And what I always end with is I'm a kind of deep theological, a little bit believer in this whole movement. And so it's not all about us. Pasturebird is one of many that I think are doing things right now. And I would say if there's a local pasture poultry farmer in your area, do whatever you can to support that farmer first. And we serve as the backstop and we serve as the sort of wholesale supplier for that big grocery store down the street that the local guy could never sell into. But one resource that we really love, I helped build this with APA, was getrealchicken.com. And that's a listing of nation and really worldwide real pastured poultry farmers doing the real thing. Many of them will not have the sexy packaging or distribution or any of those things. You may have to drive over to the farm and pick it up. But I'm a big believer in local and supporting, the niche guys first. And then if you can't, or there's a reason, then come buy from us,
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. All ships rise, so
yeah, exactly.
We're all in this together to really help people eat better and help the soil. And as a result, the soil gets better too. So
yep.
Fantastic. Thank you for all of your time today, but most importantly, the thought, the innovation, the perseverance you've had to make this happen. You're a trailblazer and you've done some amazing thing that everybody in the pasture poultry industry is benefiting from. So Paul, we really appreciate all your hard work.
I appreciate that. And, it's far from just me. We've got an awesome team here at Pasturebird, and I really stand on the shoulders of the Joel Salatins and the Alan Savorys and the Gabe Browns, which have, they've set the table, perfectly for younger entrepreneurs to come up and innovate for this next wave. So we're just excited to be part of it. And thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Take care.
Alrighty.
Thanks for listening today. You know how we love bringing you conversations with folks that have that can-do attitude, that are breaking down old paradigms. I'm impressed with how they continue to seek solutions and also work with other growers to learn from as well as share their knowledge with each other. And to learn more about what we're doing to help growers implement soil health practices, check out our website at asn.farm, and there you can click on the links to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.